Join our Patreon.
Do you really want to know? We are Mythvision.
Dr. Price. Dennis R. Lecker writes, Dr. Price, as you already know, Eisenman claimed many times in his James the Brother of Jesus that it was Paul who threw James the Just down the temple steps, breaking the leg of James. What do you think of Dr. Eisenman's claim? So maybe I'm asking two questions. First, the above, and second, how accurate do you think pseudo-Clementine recognitions and homilies are?
Well, they're novels, they're fictions, and in fact, the recognitions harks back, or should I say forward, to Dickens and his kind of fiction, where there are these incredible coincidences, and somebody meets their long-lost brother or mother or something like that. Could that be so-and-so? And it is the recognitions, because that kind of stuff happens in the pseudo-Clementines. Well, Eisenman doesn't say, oh yeah, you can swear by it, it's all accurate history. He says, however, that there are interesting and odd things there, as there are in the Mishnah or in the Slavonic Josephus. You can't totally trust what they say, but there are a number of things where you got to ask yourself, where did they get this? What is the point of it? Why would anybody say this? Could there be something to it? And he does that with the Dead Sea Scrolls. And his account of Paul is based on things from all of these. He says, okay, the Dead Sea Scrolls, they talk about the man of the lie, the spouter of lies, who breaks with the community via a dispute within the community where he attacks the Torah. And this guy is trying to convert the Gentiles too easily. You don't really have to get circumcised, and they're the simple ones of Ephraim, so-called. This is all code, but they're talking about some actual conflict. I mean, nobody doubts that, like that the wicked priest ambushed the teacher of righteousness and killed him. Nobody thinks that's a fiction. It's just that we don't really know who they're talking about. This was a major event in the origin of their group. And who could they have been talking about? I mean, it's probably not just Fred Fern, somebody we never heard of. It's probably some major figure. Well, who have we got? Who might fit? Because, we hear similar things about Paul, that he had this big blow-up with Cephas and so on. And we hear it about Simon Magus and Dositheus, who were rival would-be successors to John the Baptist and had a big dispute and went their separate ways. And there's other reasons to think Simon Magus was Paul, and that would sure fit here. With the James thing, it says the enemy pushed James down the steps. That kind of implies the Antichrist, and he's often called that. And so the man of the lie is what Belial means, the Antichrist. And if Paul is called the spouter of lies, and if he is branded a false prophet, and by the Mandeans even a false Messiah, then you gotta wonder if you can connect these dots into any meaningful pattern. And with Jesus, he shows how his great predecessor, I'd almost think that Eisenman was a reincarnation of Eisler, in his incredible book. Somebody mentioned this earlier, and I forgot to get back to it, about Eisler's The Messiah, Jesus, and John the Baptist. This book is almost as huge as Eisenman's book on James. He delves into a lot of these off-brand sources and says, this little oddity here might explain something there. And it's fascinating. Well, he says that there is a version of the Testimonium Flavianum in the Slavonic Josephus, which he says seems to be another expanded version of Josephus's The Jewish War. And we know Josephus had new additions done and added stuff to them. There's a segment about John the Baptist, though it doesn't name him, but he's described in pretty clear terms, who was involved with a revolt against the Roman occupiers, and that Jesus was too, and that he was brought before Pilate, who interrogated him, flogged him, and let him go. And then later, the Jewish people prevailed upon Jesus to be their king, and he didn't refuse them. And Eisler says this is often translated that he paid no heed to them, but it would actually be more accurate to say he didn't disdain them or something. And this, of course, has to do with the idea of the Brandon idea later, that Jesus was a revolutionary, and that Josephus, if you want to say that, if this was the original, the typical the familiar Flavianum thing would be a whitewash if all of this had been in there and was omitted. But we don't really know. We don't know who augmented Josephus in the Slavonic. But there are all kinds of weird things that Eisenman finds in these other sources that are rightly not taken seriously in one respect, because they're not just sober history, but there can be facts remembered by off-brand people beyond the reach of the churches and their censors that could give us clues, and Eisenman thinks they do, and the arguments he makes are very striking. Even from rabbinic stories and parables that look strikingly like parables in the Gospels and cast a different light on them. It's just great. It's worth going through the 1,200 pages of Eisenman's James, the Brother of Jesus, and his over 1,000-page sequel to it, the New Testament Code. Just mind-expanding.
Nice. Yeah, I guess one of the things that I keep hearing over and over, and I hear this from people who want to try and make sense of the Bible, is they think that going outside or too far, it removes, or it gets further and further away from Occam's razor in their opinion, because they're, look at right here, let's try and make sense of what we got. But that could be the case. But then you also possibly remove the opportunity or the possibility of the actual answers or other theories of people who were not accepted as part of what became the winners of history. And there might be a reason why. Now, we don't like that. We're gonna need the history to read this way. Mm-hmm. And that's why I like what you're doing, because it tells you a lot more. Mm-hmm. And it's also an interesting thing. Like, I don't do this to poke fun, just like you don't. Mm-hmm. I do this because I'm truly fascinated with learning what ideas were floating around. It just blew me away. It wasn't very long ago, a few years back, when I heard Judas was crucified. And I'm like, oh, what? Judas got crucified. That makes no sense. In one of the Apocrypha writings, and I'm thinking, what the heck is that? Why would you even have him instead of Jesus? That makes no sense. Isn't Jesus doesn't Paul say that he's the reason? It's the who would write that? So it just makes you ask questions.
Well, Judas is depicted in strange terms, even in the canonical Gospels, that he hanged himself, which is often a term for crucifixion, because you're hung on the cross. And in the place where Jesus was buried, John says, was a garden. Well, Judas was crucified in the field of blood, which has probably an association with a Baal religion and suggests a fertility god connection. And so you can kind of view Judas as the Antichrist, reflecting in a reverse way the real Christ. But there's also the idea that comes up in Islam that since Jesus was allowed to escape or even raptured up from the Garden of Gethsemane, that somebody was crucified in his place. Who could it have been? And some said, I mean, there are even weirder suggestions, like it was Pilate, or that it was Satan, or that it was some Roman spy named Sergius. I don't know where they got that, but some said it was Judas. And serves you right, pal. And now, how could that happen? Well, because in Muslim commentators, a couple of them say, ever wonder why they needed Judas to point out Jesus? I mean, everybody knew him. That was the whole problem. He was too popular. Well, maybe it was because God miraculously made all of Jesus' disciples look like Jesus, and they grabbed the wrong one, and that was Judas. Pretty imaginative, but who knows? I mean, I don't think there's really any chance that's true, but that's the kind of midrashic thinking you find among these ancient writers. So it could be like that. And but anyway you look at it, you've got a kind of a faux crucifixion of Judas with the hanging. Real strange.
Join our Patreon